Welcome to Foodball, because humans cook. And I'm just now realizing that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but the hashtag was available, so we're gonna go for it. Quarantine Quitchin, this is not. This is episode zero point 0.5, Who I Am and Why You Should Care. Remember, cooking doesn't have to be expensive, complicated, or boring. Making food should be something you enjoy, not something you're afraid of. This is our first full episode. Kind of, but not really. And we're using second person pronouns because it feels natural. If you don't like it, you can go listen to Gastropod. Seriously though, Cynthia and Nicola are awesome and you should definitely give them a listen on their various podcast channels. Like I said, this is the first real episode of Foodball, mostly. So I thought I'd give a little information on who I am and why you should care about food and me and what I want to say about food. So, who am I? My name is Zach Martin. I am a dad. I have 2 boys. I'm married. I live in Illinois, outside of St. Louis. I've been in the U.S. military. I was in the Navy for 5 years. Grew up in Savannah, Georgia. But more importantly, I had a nan, my grandma, my dad's mom. She came from an Irish family. She loved Southern cooking when she moved from the Midwest to the South. She would tell us stories about when she was learning how to make biscuits that they turned out much like hockey pucks for the first dozen or so times that she tried. But she kept learning and she kept trying and eventually made these biscuits that were just pillows and made the ones that you might get at Cracker Barrel just look like dog shit. And she taught me every chance that I asked to help her out in the kitchen and to see what she was doing and how she was doing it and how to make chicken and dumplings and how to help out with Thanksgiving dinner. And most importantly, she just taught me to always be in love with learning and learning how to cook and learning how to feed people, because cooking is, to me and to her, is about just feeding people, whether it's others or even just yourself. And she passed away and she was still not a perfect cook. There are things that she did that I would never do now after what I've learned, but she didn't have the opportunities to learn that I did. And as far as me, I spent 15 years in various places as a server in the restaurant industry, Cracker Barrel, Outback, other cafes, a little beautiful place in Carbondale, Illinois called Harbaugh's. That was a very small operation. We relied entirely on donated coffee mugs from the community. So every table's mugs are different. And that food was amazing. I've seen food and cooking industrial, McDonald's style, where you literally had robots doing part of it because it was so, you wanted it to be exactly the same every single time at every single restaurant every day. And then places like Harbaugh's that were local, and every fried egg over easy was different than every other one because you had an actual person frying the egg. And I've seen people eat from all over, up and down the coast of America, in France, in Turkey, eaten there, served people there. People are dicks and don't tip no matter where you're from, no matter where they're from, no matter where you're at, what they're eating, what they look like. There are great eaters and there are shitty eaters and there are great tippers and bad tippers. And I've worked with people who made restaurants their life and their passion, and I could never do that because I love cooking too much, and I feel like it would become too much of a job and too much of a chore if I ever did it professionally, and so I would never be a chef at a restaurant. I don't have that kind of single-minded ridiculousness. However, that does not mean that I don't appreciate what they do. I wish I could have that laser focus. And if I ever could work with them for a little bit, do that prestigious, douchey. I interned with a pasta chef for 12 months, and here's the book I wrote about it. Give me money. That would be fantastic. But I don't think that that's my lot in life. So that's bits about me and my background as much as I want to tell you right now. But more importantly, who are you? So I went into thinking about who this podcast would be for, and I considered a couple of things. I thought mostly about the ridiculous number of media outlets and TV channels and social media personalities that are around food and eating and cooking, and holy fuck, there are a lot. You know, as far as diets, there are vegans and paleo and all grain and no grain and pescatarian and traditional and Western and, you know, Chinese and Japanese and Indian and South African. And there are all these celebrity chefs that I wouldn't let my kids, or, you know, I wouldn't let them make my kids a birthday cake, let alone a meal. But there on the other side, there's YouTubers who know more about the food that they love and they love to cook and eat than the people who are ostensibly paid a shit ton of money to cook said food. You know, one of my favorites these days is Nigel Ng. You may have heard of him as Uncle Roger on YouTube. He is my family and my kids' favorite YouTube food person right now. There's a link to his stuff down in the episode description. So there's a lot of stuff about food in the world right now. Like I said, my grandma didn't have access to this. All she had was cookbooks. But even with all of that stuff about food that's available to everyone, I would venture to say that most people in America are not comfortable in their own kitchens. You know, almost anywhere that you'll live in your life has a kitchen, or at least a room with a stove and a sink and maybe a counter. Some folks are lucky enough to get microwaves, some aren't. But I feel like a lot of people just never use their kitchens for anywhere near as much cool shit as they should. Even, you know, I lived in a dorm room at Mercer University in Georgia, and dorm rooms don't have stoves. You know, you have a microwave and sometimes a hot plate, or, you know, I'm going to send my kids off to college if they go to a dorm in a college. I'm going to send them off with a rice cooker. And I'll do an episode later about rice cookers to explain exactly why I think that that's the thing, because that's new for me. I just bought a rice cooker not too long ago. So you have all this food media in the world, and so then I thought about you. I thought about all of those people terrified of their stoves. The, quote, all I can do is boil water crowd. My buddy from that dorm room at Mercer who destroyed 4 separate packages of microwave Easy Mac in a row in 4 different ways. I thought about the people who say that they're king of the grill, but wouldn't even think about trying to make shepherd's pie, you know, because kitchens are where wifey goes. And then I thought about me. I thought about how much food and cooking and passion for them have meant to me over the course of my life, and I wanted to be able to share at least a little bit of that with somebody outside my immediate family. My kids are still at the age where they're picky little assholes, so the jury's still out on what kind of eaters they're going to end up being. And hopefully they grow up voracious and curious and happy and hungry like I did. And obviously hungry in the sense of hungry for more and hungry for more learning, not malnutrition. But I didn't get where I am entirely by myself either. And lastly, I thought about my dad. He was and is a champion of traditional masculinity, an alcoholic, and so arrogant he would try to convince anybody who'd listen that he preferred both his frozen pizzas and bratwurst well done. He was the kind of man who would fall asleep while smoking ribs and have the stones to declare the carcinogenic husks on the outside of the meat some sort of extra flavor. I thought about him, and then I thought about the people like him, and I want to do something to prevent anything like that from ever happening to anybody's taste buds ever again. So I feel like I learned to be a pretty damn good cook in spite of my teachers in a lot of ways, instead of because of them. Hopefully, with this podcast, I can try to reverse that a little bit and be a quality teacher, and we can learn together, because like most things in life, you're never done learning, and if you think you're done, you're wrong. And any day that you can learn something is better than a day that you don't. So before I continue into why you should care about your food, we'll take a quick second for what I hope are sponsors. If you haven't heard about Anchor by Spotify, it's the easiest way to make a podcast with everything you need all in one place. Let me explain. Anchor has tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer, which, trust me, is a lot easier than using a super complicated, super expensive audio editing software. When hosting on Anchor, you can distribute your podcast on every listening platform you can think of, like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and more. It's everything you need to make your podcast all in one place. And best of all, Anchor is totally free. Download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. So I'm a marketer professionally, so I sincerely apologize about those, but it's the nature of the business. On a completely unrelated note, I'm very excited about the upcoming episode of mine detailing the unbelievably effective and low-priced chef's knife I use from Meissen every single day in my kitchen. Talk about a lifesaver. Seriously though, like, I love my Meissen kitchen knife, and I want 4 of them, and I bought my mom a paring knife from them for Christmas. It's awesome, and we'll talk about that in the knives episode later on. Anyway, enough about me and who I am and what I think, but why should you care about what I say about what you eat and how you make it? I think the biggest thing to start off with is eating food, not food. And, I'm aware of the Uber Eats ad campaign that's running after the 2022 Super Bowl, where, they tell you eat food, not food. And they're taking, obviously, a very literal look at it. Don't eat tape, don't eat, laundry soap, because they're very clearly not food. And that's fine, but it's a kind of a boiled down representation of, like, walking through a grocery store. I'm reading a book by Michael Pollan called In Defense of Food, an Omnivore's Manifesto. An Eater's Manifesto, where he talks about the difference between food and food-like products. And it's kind of become part of my general philosophy that, buy food that is food. And that may seem either super redundant or completely pointless, because if you can eat it, then it's food. And sure, you can eat most things that you buy in a supermarket, but it's not really food anymore, depending on the level of processing. Like, you can take a bag of rice and a bag of Uncle Ben's 90-second, Spanish rice in a bag bullshit, and sure, they both have a rice product in them, but one takes cooking and one doesn't. And, every study that's ever been done basically shows that processed foods that have a bunch of preservatives and added stuff aren't not even they're not even not good for you. They're just not good. Another one of my favorite YouTubers, Nat's What I Reckon, a wonderful Australian guy, starts a lot of his episodes with "fuck jar sauce" or "fuck packet rice."
Fuck that other sauce. Fuck jar sauce. Fuck packet rice. Fuck jar sauce. Death to jar sauce!
And he's right. Like, that stuff is gross. And when you're in a position of being single or being a college student and you maybe don't have access to a stove or, a lot of money, you might think that that kind of food is what you should eat because at least it's better than a cheeseburger. And it's really not. It's really not. It's not good food. It's not good for you. It's not food. And, we'll get into ways in future episodes about, the difference between making a rice dish with rice and making a 90-second microwave packet bullshit rice. And why, it's not necessarily as cost productive as you might think. It might not take as long as you might think. So, a lot of those reasons people use for cooking or eating that bullshit fake food don't really apply. So, I'll mention some things that are, food-ish. One of my favorites of all time is Velveeta, which is not cheese. It is a pasteurized processed cheese food product. And anything that you're putting in your body that has that many names usually comes with a prison sentence. So, try to just be... I'm going to try to teach y'all to be more aware of what you're putting in your grocery basket and what you're putting in your cart and what you're putting in your face. Alongside the idea that food needs to be cooked, mostly. So if you're going to eat food instead of not food, you need to know how to cook it. Also, as a, reverse of that, not food doesn't require much cooking because it's not food. The packet rice that goes in the microwave for 90 seconds, that's not cooking it. That's just heating it up. Places like St. Louis Bread Company, Panera Bread, get a lot of shit, and rightfully so, because their food, quote unquote, is not cooked. Their soups and their pastas are not made there. They are heated in bags and microwaved and dumped into plates and given to people. And I will not eat there because it's trash food. So I feel like there's a lot of culture around food and eating that falls into three distinct camps. The first one is this concept of nutritionism. It's like a religion of nutrients. You may, depending on your age and what your upbringing was like, you may remember that for a long time fats were the worst thing in the world, and low fat this, and we have to eat low fat that, and studies were low fat because fat is the devil, and fat causes heart disease, and fat causes obesity and diabetes. And that kind of came, and then we had Snackwells and Olestra, for Christ's sake. Anal leakage is not worth a lower chance of heart disease. I don't give a shit what else is going on with your life. Even though they were delicious. They were amazing. And so nutritionism focuses on the idea that the nutrients and macronutrients like fat and protein and carbs and the micronutrients like vitamins and minerals are the most important thing about the food that you eat. And you have to basically do math to make sure that you are getting your 100 milligrams of zinc and your 27 milligrams of sodium. And, you're trying to do all this math because food in this philosophy are just Lego pieces. Where if a piece of fish and a piece of bacon have the same amount of calories and fat, then they're interchangeable. I don't know if you've met a pig and a salmon. They're not. They are wildly distinct creatures. So treating them in a way that says that they are the same is fucking stupid. And not only that, but you have to think about something like me. In my experience, my blood cholesterol level about a year ago was over 400. To put that into some perspective, somebody with high cholesterol that needs to do something about their diet and exercise and maybe take medication is around 150 to 200. My doctor told me that there was literally no way that my diet, exercise, lifestyle could have contributed to my cholesterol being over 400. That's genetic. He said there's nothing you could have done to prevent this or do to fix it. Now, with diet and exercise, you have to take pharmaceutical solutions. And so I did, and I am, and I'm proud to report that my cholesterol is down to a healthy level purely because of pharmacological input. And, that's obviously very anecdotal, but, I could have been eating low cholesterol, all plant fiber my whole life, and I would still have a genetic predisposition to high cholesterol. So the importance of this zero-sum nutritionist philosophy of eating is not really all that good. It's not really all that helpful. And not only that from a health standpoint, but from just an eating standpoint, it turns food into fucking Legos. And Legos are not fun to eat. They are fun to build, but I feel like the nutritionist way of life looks at food as fuel, and, all it is just dumping stuff into your face so you can walk around and you don't get to enjoy it. You're not allowed to enjoy it. Growing up in the zero fat world, low fat cookies are fucking gross. And low fats are not, no, that's not a thing. Because if you start trying to replace fats in fat, then that defeats the whole purpose. So it pulls all the passion and the joy out of eating, and people become guilty about eating what they think is good food. Because it is good food. Good food is good. And on that note, so we come to the second kind of culture around food and eating is, kind of the idea of
organic grocery store whole food bullshit.
Gourmet bullshit. And this has been something that I have railed against for a really, really long time. It's the idea that the only way to experience really, really good food is to, fancy it up and have cultural training and, do explosions and fusions and things like this gastropub in St. Louis has a menu that includes a Midwestern burger listed as 2 tenderloin patties, sharp cheddar, caramelized bacon onions, sour beer pickled de gallo, Scotch barrel-aged chipotle barbecue sauce, and fries. So there's this idea that, you have to make food, which should be food, remember. You have to make this food sound like food that it's not, or sound like food that is somehow better, or fancier, or more exclusive. Like breaking down this burger, tenderloin patties. Don't make hamburger patties out of tenderloin. And we'll go into that later about why that's wrong. That's a dumb thing to make patties out of. Just trust me on this. Caramelized bacon onions. I'd like to find out what exactly the fuck a bacon onion is. Bacon is made of pigs and onions are made of onions. Neither the twain shall meet. If you'd said caramelized onions with pork belly, hell yeah, sign me up. That's not the same thing. Pickle de gallo, sure, that's just a fun play on words, but just say that they're pickles. And finally, you can't age barbecue sauce in a Scotch barrel. It just doesn't work. Like, that's not what barrel aging is. That's not what barrel aged whiskey's for. You can say we made barbecue sauce with barrel aged whiskey. Sure, cool. That's probably a better idea. But that kind of stuff makes human beings who eat food scared, because why can't you just say it's a fucking bacon cheeseburger with caramelized onions on it? Why does it have to be translated into this Epicurean gastronomy nonsense? And not only that, your bacon cheeseburger, because you spent $25 trying to make it sound fancier, now costs $25. And people aren't going to eat that. And I've dined at, I've eaten a Wagyu steak in Dubai that was $200, and it was a freaking amazing steak. But that's because it was a Wagyu steak. Like, it wasn't because they tried to fancy up Wagyu. Wagyu beef is, by extension, like, really good. Like, it's really good by nature because it's real food. You don't have to, call something Emperor's Fancy Dick sausage or whatever and make it, you don't make food approachable to people that way. And it's wildly out of touch with actual people who eat things. And so then on the other side of that coin, we have our third camp of the food media, your, celebrity chefs, your TV shows, your diet gurus, people like that. Just think about this, like how much, everybody that has any desire or like of food and cooking has their favorites and they're despised of these TV food personalities. But think about how much of their food have you actually made or eaten. So how do you know if it's any good? And how do you know if they know what the hell they're talking about? And anybody who studies food or knows anything about marketing knows that food can be made to look like whatever you want it to, and 90% of that time is not actually made out of food. It's shaving cream or glycerin oil or Vaseline or, wooden stakes propping up cheeseburgers. So the food media then has to present this idea of, you're selling a personality and not food. You're not selling, Nigella Lawson and the BBC and Bravo's Top Chef. Like, that's not how people actually cook. Those are how people who go to culinary school and make a life out of those things are told that they're supposed to cook. There's a lot more untrained, you'd call them, not cordon bleu graduates who are starting restaurants and finding success because they cook the way people cook and they cook food that people want to eat. And I feel like we're starting to hopefully get out of the grip of you have to be a gourmet chef for your food to be good. There is something to be said of learning techniques and kind of learning the history and reasons why things are done the way they're done. And we'll do that on this podcast to a certain extent. Because when I learned how to take photographs and when I learned to be a Navy photographer, the mantra was, in order to break the rules, you have to know the rules. And I've kind of always operated under that way. So those are your three camps, basically, like the nutritionist folks who zero-sum everything into Lego bricks of vitamin B12 and whole grain percentage and sodium. The gourmet side, like St. Louis has a lot of these kinds of folks. I'll throw a shout out to Pastaria of Niche Food Group, who, in my little Twitter rant, put together a 20 some odd dollar plate of cacio e pepe, which is just pasta and cheese and black pepper, which any idiot college freshman can make at home if they know the technique, which we will do in our pasta episode. And then the third group is the food media, and, you know, however you feel about media aside, is a pretty severe indicator of how people view and talk about and consume and create food today. So all that said, you know, there's a weird dynamic in our country around food and eating it and cooking it. And I want to try to lift the wool a little bit. You know, I work in marketing. I do social media, which is a direct reflection of how successful this podcast is going to be. And so with that said, I know how the bullshit works. Like, I know how media operates. I know how celebrity stuff happens. I grew up in a house where we watched Emerald Live, and Jacques Pepin, and Natalie Dupree, and Yan Can Cook, and all these chefs who would never have made it past a pilot episode today for any number of reasons, you know, the least of which was the amount of cooking sherry Natalie Dupree could down over the length of a 22-minute show on PBS, of all places. And then on the other side of the coin, now you have people like Guy Fieri, who I only recently decided to start saying his name correctly, and is, I would like to make this 100% crystal clear, Guy Fieri is a human being who is one of the greatest, most generous, honest, good to his core, quality human beings on this entire planet. But, that said, I would not ask him to make me nachos if it were the only thing between me and starving to death. Not coincidentally, he is my dad's favorite food personality. Roundly, and I cannot stress this enough, fuck Flavortown.
Hey, I'm Guy Fieri, and you know what I need? I need you riding shotgun. I'm on my way to Flavortown. That's a dusty road in Flavortown right there, buddy. This is like a freight train to Flavortown, dude. Ravioli train is coming to Flavortown.
Please, however, support the Guy Fieri Foundation through the link in the episode description. I am not a monster. What I am, though, is someone who wants, selfishly, for people to be as excited about food as I am. And I realize that's basically impossible on a large scale, for any number of reasons. Some people honestly don't give a shit about what they eat, or how it's cooked, or where it came from, or what it ate, or what it's even going to do to them health-wise or not, or whatever. Maybe to them, you know, these kind of folks, it's not important. And they have convinced themselves, whether through their own upbringing or the media they consume or whatever, that they believe that that's the case, that their food doesn't matter. And I would argue, and I will argue until the day that I die, that eating and food and cooking is the single most important thing in your entire life. Because you eat every single day of your life. From the day you are born until the day you are died. Until the day you die. Give or take some, you know, intermittent fasting, juice cleanses, religious requirements, you know, hangover days, things like that. But there's only one other biological function happening in your life at that rate, and I'm not going to sit here and talk about shitting for an hour every week. What you put in your mouth makes you you and connects you to everything else around you, whether you want it to or not. The quote that we nerdy, bougie, cooking, foodie types like to throw out is, "Tell me what you eat, I will tell you what you are," by Jean-Antoine Briand-Savary. I'm really bad at pronouncing French names, but he is an 18th century French lawyer, and he wrote a book called The Physiology of Taste. He is described as an epicure and gastronome, which is like the Victorian douche way of saying foodie, just like foodie is the current douche way of saying likes good food that tastes good. Savarin's quote is largely kind of mistranslated to say that you are what you eat, which is not the same thing, much like blood is thicker than water is not the same thing as the original quote. The blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb, which basically makes it mean two completely different things. But that's just a lesson in not believing everything you read. But going back to the Savarin quote, I will tell you what you are. There are environmental concessions and things to think about. There are moral and ethical quandaries with what we eat and how we cook. There are, everybody's diet is to certain extents their own choice. And I want to reach the people who don't think about it and don't put a lot of effort into what choices they're making about their food. Because I feel like having the agency to cook your own food and taking back the power and, you know, even in some ways taking back ownership of what you're putting in your body is one of the most important things that people can do to affect change in their own lives. And that'll be kind of the woke thing will be a whole nother episode later because we're already 40 minutes in. But just, you know, just because you appreciate good food, going back to epicure and gastronome, just because you appreciate good food doesn't mean that you have to be a dick about it. So, hopefully, after all that, you're at least a little convinced to keep listening. Primarily because I'm going to keep talking about cooking and food and the dumb people who are involved with it and the dumb things they do around it, whether or not anybody actually listens. That's the wonderful thing about podcasts, is that I can just do them however I want. But we are always obviously open for questions, complaints, bad memes, anything you want. So thanks for listening to this first half real but not real first episode of Foodball. We are on Stitcher. Give us money so we can have more nice things like a new microphone or non-free podcast editing software. We also do have a Twitter. It's at foodballpod. Send us an email at foodballpod@gmail.com. Tweet us some funny bad memes. We'll see you next week. Thanks for listening to Foodball.